2024 Mustang RTR Spec 2 not only looks great, but it also handles great too, and that's mainly because of their suspension setup. They're equipped with RTR Tactical Performance front struts and rear shocks, and then they also have the RTR springs. Now, this entire combo together is going to lower your Mustang about an inch all the way around, and not only is it going to lower it an inch, but it's also going to improve the performance and the ride quality of it. So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to install the front strut, the rear shocks, and the springs on a brand new 2024 Mustang. We're going to start off this install by installing the front first, so let's get after it. First thing we need to do is take off the caliper. There's going to be two 15mm bolts that hold this on. Take those off and then set the caliper off to the side. When you take the caliper off, go ahead and set it on something. That way you're not putting too much stress on the brake hose, but even when you set it on something, make sure the brake hose isn't kinked. Next, we're going to disconnect the sway bar end link. Grab a 17mm wrench, 18mm socket. Pop that guy out of there. Disconnect the wiring harness from the side of the strut. Now we're going to take off the two nuts that hold on the strut. Now this bolt's going to be in there pretty good, so usually what I like to do is just take the nut here, put it on the end, and then you can kind of hammer the bolt out from there. After you do everything inside the wheel well, you're going to want to take off these three nuts here that hold on the strut. And when you're taking these off, these are going to let the strut fall, so just be prepared and have one hand on the strut already. Once those three bolts are off, you can remove it then. At this point, we're going to disassemble our front strut. If you don't have a spring compressor, parts stores usually rent them out. I definitely highly advise you to go get one of these because almost every other way taking these apart is a little bit sketchy and dangerous. So go pick one of these up, but we're just going to tighten down the spring compressor. Now we're going to take off the top nut. Be careful because sometimes the top hat will spin, so you might have to stop it with your hand. But if you're going to do that, just make sure to be careful because it's going to have a lot of force. Once you take the top hat nut off, you can take the top hat off. We're now going to assemble the tactical suspension. We're first going to start off with this ring here. Then this guy. And then you're going to use the dust boot from the factory suspension. And then from there, put your spring on. And remember, you're using the factory top hat from the factory suspension. Then after that, you're going to put your locking washer on. And then the nut that they provide with the RTR Tactical Kit. And then from here, we're going to tighten everything down. Now to tighten this down, we're going to put our spring compressor back on it.
Now that we have everything reassembled, we can throw it back in the S650. All right, we're gonna start off by reinstalling the top 3 bolts here. So Slide your strut up into place. Then loosely put these factory nuts on. Now we can do the bottom. Push down on the hub assembly a little bit until you get everything lined up. Make sure you have a bolt ready because this is a little bit difficult. You're gonna want the spline side in on the right side of the strut assembly. Once you get the top in, do the bottom. To get the bottom bolt in, you'll have to push on the hub a little bit, like towards the car. And then from there, just line up the splines on the bolt with the hub and get the bolt the rest of the way through. After you get the bolts through, put the nut on the end and tighten everything up then. Now at this point, we can start reassembling everything, and then once we're done reassembling, we'll tighten those top nuts. These two strut bolts are going to be torqued to 184 foot-pounds. We're going to torque the caliper bolts to 84 foot-pounds. We're going to torque these sway bar end links to 84 foot-pounds as well. We're going to tighten these three top nuts to 46 foot-pounds. And then I will end up checking this once we get the car back on the ground and have some weight on it as well. At this point, we're wrapped up at the front. You can repeat the same process on the opposite side and then follow us down to the rear. Start this off by removing the two shock mount bolts. Now we're gonna put this thing up in the air. Now we're gonna take out the two lower mount bolts. We're gonna remove these two 13mm bolts here because we're gonna wanna loosen up the subframe to get the springs out. If you own a 2024 Mustang convertible, you are going to have this brace and you will need to remove it to end up doing this install. We're gonna loosen this front subframe bolt. Now, when you're loosening this, make sure you have something supporting the subframe before doing so. Now we're going to loosen up the rear subframe bolt. Before we pull out the spring, it'll make your life a little bit easier disconnecting the brake line. Now we're going to lower the subframe so we can get our spring out. With our subframe loosened, we can pull our spring out. Make sure to grab the rubber piece from the factory spring and put it on your new RTR spring. And then when you're putting the spring in, make sure that the bottom spring is lined up correctly with the spring perch. Once the spring's in, we can start raising our subframe back into place. At this point, we can start reinstalling our subframe bolts. And make sure to put these in by hand instead of just running an impact on them right away. Before tightening down the rear all the way, I'm going to slide in the front. And we're going to loosely put in these 13mm bolts in the front of that bracket. Make sure to do this before tightening down the subframe bolts. We're now going to torque the front and rear subframe bolts to 129 foot-pounds. We're now going to assemble the rear tactical performance shock, and at this point we are going to use the RTR shock mount. These things are a lot more beefy and durable than the factory shock mounts, and I highly suggest picking these up. If you do not want to pick these up and you want to use the factory shock mounts, you will have to drill out the holes for them to be a little bit bigger so they'll actually end up working. Now what we're going to end up doing is we're going to disassemble our factory shock here. Stick a flat in here, pop the cover off, and that will reveal the bolt. And the only reason I'm actually taking this apart is so I can steal the boot from it. Grab your little plastic guy here, slide that on first. Grab your rubber bushing, slide that on next. Grab your factory boot here. At this point, we're going to start our RTR shock mount. Slide it on here just like that. And then from there, you're going to put your spacer on. And then you're going to put one of these nuts on. You're going to want to tighten down one nut at a time, and they're going to get torqued to 22 foot-pounds. After you tighten it, go ahead and torque it. Install your second one. Again, 22 foot-pounds. At this point, we just have to reassemble everything, which you guys know how to do because you just took it apart. But follow along as we reassemble our tactical suspension into the S650 Mustang. To make things easier on yourself, end up putting these lower mount bolts in first, and then we'll do the top. Make sure these are loose, don't tighten these down all the way. Once you have all your hardware loosely installed, go back over and tighten everything down. Torque the lower shock mount bolts to 35 foot-pounds. Torque these top bolts to 66 foot-pounds. Now the factory top cap will fit on these, but we're not going to put it on yet because we are going to make some adjustments later on. At this point, we're wrapped up at the rear on this side, so you can go to the opposite side and repeat the exact same process. We're all wrapped up with the RTR tactical suspension install, and I gotta say this thing looks absolutely awesome, lowered an inch all the way around. Now we did do some test driving with the new suspension on it, and it definitely handles a lot better than factory, so we're pretty excited about it. Now, if you want to purchase any of these suspension components, we will have a link down below in our description, but it is time to drop a gear and disappear, and we'll catch you on the next one.